Courage matters now more than ever. You know, in the last year, I have seen so many business leaders and entrepreneurs and executives really use the crisis in the world as a whole as impetus to take courageous, bold action on their business models, on their strategies, on how they even engage employees in ways that they had perhaps been holding back on for years. In fact, in some cases, it had been long overdue, but the pandemic and the crisis at hand gave them the energy to take bold action where it was needed. And this is not unusual in the midst of a crisis. And yet I would argue that courage today is needed now more than ever. You know, in the last year, those of us who are change agents or who have been seeing how our organizations could evolve more effectively to face into the future have been dismayed, certainly like all of us have been, at the pace and the enormity of the change that we've all faced into. But at the same time, hopeful that maybe this opened up cracks in our systems, our structures, our strategies that would allow us to take some quantum leaps forward courageously in how we want to reinvent our businesses, our leadership, our lives. And yet what sadly I've started to see in some organizations and some leadership teams, now that there's a little bit of a breath on, okay, what's next, there's a little bit of a pulling back on the courage muscle. A little bit of a kind of stop the bleeding mentality. We did that with the crisis, and now I don't know if it's time to take bold action in some of these other areas that we could in order to be more future facing. I'm very concerned about this because now more than ever is the time to reinvent how we structure our businesses, how we engage people, and how we unleash potential and new possibilities to create value in a rapidly changing landscape. So what holds people back from courage? This is something to think about. I think it was Winston Churchill who once said that courage is the first among all virtues because it guarantees all of the others. And if you think about that, courage is what it takes to set a bold new course. Courage is what it takes to have a difficult conversation. Courage is what it takes to speak up with a divergent view when everyone else on the leadership team is thinking in a different direction. Courage is what it takes to actually say, you know what, I might have been wrong. The bet we placed in this direction may have been wrong given the rapidly changing dynamics in the marketplace or whatever other changes you're facing. And so I would like to shift my perspective and get the learning from the experiments that we took and then move in this direction instead. Courage really comes from Latin, and the root of it is heart. To kind of face into things fully. It doesn't mean that there's an absence of fear. It means feeling the fear and taking action with heart anyway. Without courage, leaders cannot truly help people seize the opportunities that are present in the midst of all these changes. So there's 3 questions I'd like to invite you to reflect on today, and 4 actions or ways that you could kind of really embody courage in your life and your leadership. Okay, the 3 questions are the following. Where is courage needed in your team or your organization right now, but it's being avoided? Okay, pinpoint that. Number 2, what are the reasons that it's being avoided? Maybe we tried it before in 1972 and it never worked. Maybe there's a change in leadership and there's unstable kind of political relationships, and therefore people are not willing to go out on a limb or, put their necks out. When you start to hear that kind of language, it's a fear that's coming up. And then the 3rd question I think is really for you to ponder for yourself. What do you care so deeply about that you would be willing to emotionally risk or feel a bit vulnerable in taking a stand for or acting courageously around something so that it advances the collective good? As an example, a leader that I'm honored to work with right now, in charge of a large sales organization in the healthcare industry, really faced into these questions. And one of the things that he discovered that he's very much committed to is leading with head and heart, to truly listen to and serve his people so that they can serve more patients and help people deal with a very challenging health condition. So if he's truly going to be of service, sharing more of his heart to kind of express the range of emotions that all of them are undergoing after a massive reorganization that has created a ton of uncertainty, this would be necessary. So in a recent meeting, he actually, not like his typical meetings, shared not only the analytics, right, and perhaps the strategic direction and the strength and the character and the competence, but actually opened up more emotionally about how he was feeling given all of the changes going on and the uncertainty in a way that normalized and validated all of the emotions that the entire team was going through. And in this process, he got so much positive feedback that it helped people share their own emotions and release untapped potential for new ideas on how they could thrive together. In that moment, that small moment of speaking up courageously, where he may have stood back from that in the past and maybe avoided the emotional risk or exposure of sharing authentic emotion, it actually opened up a whole new level of collective teamwork. And now new possibilities are brewing, and most importantly, the energy has been released. That's an example. So those are the 3 questions to ponder on. The 4 types of courage that you may be able to try on today are the following. Number 1, how might you have the courage to speak up? Just like this leader, is there something that you could speak up around that is perhaps not the norm, either in your team, your organization, or your typical way of leading, that if you spoke up, you would move through a little bit of discomfort, maybe a little bit of fear of how that would land for others, but it would open up a new conversation and invite people into new possibilities. So that's number 1, the courage to speak up. Number 2 is the courage to let go. In another example with another team I'm working with, there are 2 leaders that unfortunately have a history of having some challenging interactions with one another. And both of them own their contribution to that relationship and the challenge in it. And yet, what's necessary now is for both of them to let go of some of the unfinished business in their own minds of what the other person should have, could have, would have done to make that relationship better, and to trust. The courage to let go is also the courage to trust when they may not have evidence yet that they should, but that is an act that is necessary for the entire collective good of this team. The 3rd type of courage is the courage to act. Now, this sounds so simple, but I'll tell you, in the face of the current environment, there may be teams that have been acting so much due to the crisis that it's entirely seductive to not take action right now, exactly when we do need to take action. So the courage to act is the 3rd type of courage. And the 4th type of courage would be something I would call the courage to change your mind. As the world is changing, as information is evolving so rapidly, you may learn another aspect to a situation that you had not seen before. And that courage to say, you know what, I was wrong, or you know what, I didn't see this angle before and I now change my perspective. That's courageous and again opens the conversation. In Recalibrate for Impact, my accelerator, these incredibly high quality leaders that are part of this experience are all facing into these kinds of levels of courage every day as they get clear on what they take a stand for and the kind of what we call impact experiments they want to take on to drive greater impact in their organizations. Because you know what? Courage is contagious. I hope that you can take on these 4 types of courage yourself. And if interested, please join me in Recalibrate for Impact. You can find out more about that at www.recalibrateforimpact.com.